I had been driving through this blizzard for almost 9 hours straight, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. The cake box sat securely on the passenger seat, a reminder of why I was risking this journey. Sarah would turn 35 today, and despite our recent rough patch, I wanted to surprise her. Our marriage had been struggling lately, but I remembered how her eyes used to light up when I did something unexpected. The roads were treacherous, visibility near zero at times, but I pushed forward thinking about her smile. Before I tell you what happened when I finally reached home, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you have ever gone out of your way for someone who did not appreciate it. My job as a construction project manager frequently took me away from home. I had been overseeing a major development in Buffalo, about 400 miles from our suburban house outside of Boston. The distance had been taking its toll on my 10-year marriage to Sarah. When we first met in college during a literature class we both needed for credits, there was an immediate connection. She had dropped her books, and I helped gather them, noticing she had dog-eared the exact same passages in The Great Gatsby that I had. We got coffee afterward and talked for hours. Those early years were magical. We got married at 25, bought our first home at 27, and settled into careers we both enjoyed. Sarah worked as an interior designer, her creativity and eye for beauty, one of the many things I adored about her. We talked about having children, but both agreed to establish our careers first. Looking back, I realize we kept moving that goalpost further away. The past year had marked a noticeable shift in our relationship. Phone calls that once lasted an hour became brief 5-minute check-ins. Her texts grew shorter, often just one-word replies. When I came home from projects, she seemed distracted, glued to her phone, laughing at messages I never got to see. The distance between us grew beyond just physical miles. I tried everything I could think of to bridge that gap. I sent flowers to her office. I suggested weekend getaways. I even went to 3 sessions with a marriage counselor on my own, when Sarah refused to join, hoping to get insights on how to reconnect with her. The counselor had suggested more quality time together, which is why this surprise visit for her birthday felt so important. The Buffalo project was the biggest of my career, a multi-million-dollar commercial complex that could lead to a promotion if handled successfully. My boss Frank had made it clear he needed me on site continuously for the crucial foundation work happening that week. "Frank, I need to head home tomorrow," I told him in his temporary site office. "It is my wife's birthday, and things have been tough between us lately." He sighed heavily. "Drew, you know this is a critical phase. The concrete pour is scheduled and we have inspectors coming. I understand, but Tom can handle the inspectors." "He knows this project as well as I do," I argued, referring to my capable assistant manager. Frank stared at the construction plans, then at me. "One day. Be back the following morning. And you are taking responsibility if anything goes south." I thanked him profusely, already planning my surprise in my head. I would make the 9-hour drive, show up with her favorite cake from that special bakery, and remind her why we fell in love. Maybe this gesture would help restart what we had lost. Sarah's sister Amanda had been another complication in our marriage. She had divorced 3 years ago and seemed determined to criticize everything about my relationship with Sarah. "You could do better," I overheard her tell Sarah once, not knowing I was within earshot. Amanda had moved to a town just 20 minutes from our house last year, and since then her influence over Sarah had grown stronger. Financial tensions had also been mounting between us. Our joint account showed increasing withdrawals for shopping sprees and expensive restaurant meals with Amanda. When I brought this up, Sarah accused me of controlling her and keeping tabs. "I earn my own money too," she had snapped during our last argument 2 weeks before my planned surprise visit. "I am not questioning your right to spend," I had replied calmly. "I am worried about our savings for the future we talked about." She had rolled her eyes and walked out of the room, conversation over. That pattern had become all too familiar lately. Despite these issues, I held on to hope. Relationships go through phases, I told myself. We just needed to reconnect, to remember what brought us together in the first place. This birthday surprise would be the perfect opportunity. The morning of my departure, I checked the weather forecast one last time. Winter storm warnings flashed across my phone screen, predicting 12 to 18 inches of snow along my route. "You are crazy to drive in this," my coworker, Louise said, watching me pack up my truck. Just call her and wish her happy birthday. Go next weekend. I shook my head. It will not hit until this afternoon. I can get ahead of the worst of it. Your funeral, he muttered, but help me load my overnight bag anyway. I left the construction site at 9 in the morning, under clear skies, making good time for the first 2 hours. My first stop was at Sweetheart's Bakery in Albany, a place Sarah and I had discovered during a weekend trip 3 years ago. She had declared their chocolate raspberry cake the best she had ever tasted. Special occasion, the baker asked, as she carefully placed the cake in a box. My wife's birthday, I replied, watching her add the final piping of white chocolate to form the pattern of waves, a reminder of our honeymoon in Hawaii. She is lucky to have such a thoughtful husband, the woman said, smiling as she handed me the box. If only Sarah still felt that way, I thought, but did not say. The storm caught up with me just past Albany. The first fat snowflakes quickly multiplied, reducing visibility and coating the highway. Traffic slowed to 30 miles per hour, then 20. By the time I reached the Massachusetts border, the roads were treacherous sheets of ice underneath several inches of snow. I passed 3 cars that had slid into ditches, their hazard lights blinking forlornly. My phone rang through the car speakers. James, my best friend since high school. Where are you, man? He asked. Sarah just texted asking if I had heard from you. On the road, I replied, gripping the steering wheel tighter as a gust of wind buffeted my truck. Trying to surprise her for her birthday. A moment of silence. In this weather, the news is saying this is the worst storm in 5 years. I have come too far to turn back now, I said, not mentioning that the thought had crossed my mind several times. Drew, no birthday surprise is worth risking your life. I laughed nervously. I will be fine. My truck handles well in snow. As if to challenge my confidence, a semi-truck ahead of me jackknifed slightly before the driver corrected. My heart pounded as I carefully navigated around it, my tires finding precious little traction. 4 hours into my journey, I pulled into a gas station for fuel and a bathroom break. The small convenience store was eerily empty, except for the attendant, an older man with a graying beard. Headed far in this mess, he asked as I paid for coffee. Boston area, I replied. He whistled. You got another 4 or 5 hours in these conditions. They are saying some of the highways might close soon. I nodded grimly, checking my phone to find alternate routes just in case. Back in the truck, sipping the mediocre coffee, memories of past birthdays with Sarah flooded my mind. Her 30th, when I had arranged a surprise party with all her friends. Her 32nd, when we had taken a weekend trip to Vermont and stayed in a cabin with no electricity, just firelight and each other. Her 34th last year, when my gift of diamond earrings had been met with a polite thank you but little enthusiasm. When had things changed so drastically between us? Was it the distance my job created? Was it something deeper? These questions haunted me as I navigated increasingly dangerous roads. Around hour 6, my truck's heating system began to falter, blowing lukewarm air that did little to combat the freezing temperature outside. I zipped my jacket higher and kept driving, determined to reach Sarah. A complete whiteout forced me to pull over for 30 minutes, unable to see more than a few feet ahead. I called Sarah then, not to spoil the surprise, but just to hear her voice. Hey, she answered, sounding distracted. Hi, just checking in. How's your day going? Fine. Amanda is coming over later. A pause. Where are you? Still at work. I lied. The project is keeping me busy. Of course it is, she replied, a hint of something bitter in her tone. I need to go. Talk later. The call ended before I could even wish her happy birthday. I sat there in my idle truck, snowbound, and suddenly questioning everything about this journey. Was I fighting for something already lost? The thought entered my mind, unwelcome but persistent. Please, just let me get home safely, I whispered to no one in particular, as the snow finally lessened enough for me to continue. I finally pulled into our driveway at 11:30 at night, exhausted but relieved to have made it. Amanda's silver Audi was parked in the visitor spot, confirming what Sarah had mentioned earlier. The house glowed warmly against the snow-covered landscape, a stark contrast to the dark, frigid journey I had just completed. Carefully balancing the cake box, I used my key to quietly open the front door, planning to surprise them in the kitchen where voices and laughter could be heard. I silently removed my snow-covered boots and jacket in the foyer, my socks making no sound on the hardwood floor as I approached. "Has Drew called to wish you happy birthday?" At least I heard Amanda ask, the clink of wine glasses punctuating her question. "Earlier." Same old story. "Project this work," that Sarah replied, her words slightly slurred. They must have been drinking for a while. I paused in the hallway just out of sight of the kitchen entrance, suddenly hesitant. "I do not know how you put up with him being gone so much," Amanda continued. "Jackson was the same way before I finally pulled the plug." There was a moment of silence, and I nearly stepped forward to announce my presence when Sarah spoke again. "Sometimes when he is driving back from these jobs, especially in bad weather," her voice dropped lower, conspiratorial. "God, I hope he crashes. I could use the insurance." The cake nearly slipped from my suddenly numb fingers. Amanda's laugh echoed in the kitchen. Or at least a few months of silence. "That man never stops talking about his precious projects." They both erupted into laughter, the sound piercing through me like shards of ice, colder than anything I had driven through that day. My heart thundered in my chest. 9 hours of dangerous driving, risking my life, all to surprise a woman who just wished for my death. The room seemed to tilt around me as their laughter continued. "Remember when he tried to get you to go to that marriage counselor?" Amanda snickered. "As if the problem was something you could fix." "I know, right? The problem is I married an ambitious bore who cares more about concrete foundations than his own wife," Sarah replied. I stood frozen, my mind racing through options. Confront them. Break down. Simply leave. Some distant, rational part of my brain noted the irony. Sarah had finally told the truth about her feelings, just not to my face. With mechanical movements, I stepped into the kitchen doorway. They did not notice me at first. Wine glasses raised in another toast to something I did not catch. I silently placed the cake box on the granite countertop nearest me. The soft thud finally caught their attention. Sarah turned, her smile freezing and then collapsing as she registered my presence. The color drained from her face. "Drew," she whispered, her eyes darting from me to the cake box to the window where snow still fell heavily outside. Amanda's hand covered her mouth, eyes wide with shock. I said nothing. What was there to say? I simply looked at Sarah, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time in months. I saw a stranger wearing my wife's face. Without a word, I turned and walked back toward the foyer. I heard chair legs scrape against tile as Sarah jumped up. "Drew, wait." I did not mean I closed the front door behind me, cutting off her words. The snow continued to fall indifferently around me as I got back into my truck and drove away. I checked into a Holiday Inn 10 miles from our house, the only place I could find with vacancy due to stranded travelers. The desk clerk eyed my lack of luggage curiously, but said nothing as he handed over a key card. In the anonymous hotel room, I finally let the emotions overtake me. I sat on the edge of the bed and sobbed for the death of my marriage, for the 9 hours of my life I had just risked for someone who wished me harm, for the fool I had been. My phone buzzed repeatedly with texts and calls from Sarah. "Drew, please come home. I am so sorry, I did not mean it. It was just stupid talk. Please call me. Where are you? I am worried." I turned the phone off and lay back on the unfamiliar mattress, staring at the ceiling until exhaustion finally pulled me into restless sleep. Morning brought clarity, if not peace. I turned my phone back on and sent Sarah a single text: "I need space. We'll come by to get some clothes while you are at work." Her immediate response, "Please do not do this. We need to talk," went unanswered. I waited until 11, when I knew she would be at her office, and returned to the house. Everything looked different in the harsh daylight, as if my perception had fundamentally shifted. Photos of us on the walls now seemed like artifacts from another life. In our bedroom, I methodically packed enough clothes for 2 weeks. On impulse, I opened Sarah's desk drawer where she kept financial documents. Credit card statements revealed purchases at jewelry stores and high-end restaurants on days she had claimed to be working late. One receipt tucked between statements was for a hotel room downtown dated just 3 weeks earlier. My phone pinged with a text message from a number I did not recognize. "It is Amanda." Sarah is beside herself. What you heard was just stupid drunk talk. I blocked the number without replying. As I was leaving, our neighbor Tim was shoveling his driveway. He waved me over. "Rough night?" he asked, noting my haggard appearance. "You could say that." He leaned on his shovel. "I saw you leave again right after you got home." "Everything okay?" I considered brushing him off, but found myself telling him what happened. He shook his head grimly. "That is awful, Drew. For what it is worth, I have noticed a lot of coming and going when you are away. Different cars in the driveway, if you catch my meaning." Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. I thanked him and left my mind made up. I called James from the hotel room, and he listened without interruption to the whole sordid story. "Stay with me," he offered immediately. "I have a spare room." "Thanks, but I think I need to go back to Buffalo. Throw myself into work while I figure things out." "You going to try to work it out with her?" he asked carefully. I laughed a hollow sound. "Would you?" "Not a chance in hell," he replied honestly. The next day I met with a divorce attorney, who laid out my options. "Given what you have told me, especially the financial discoveries, you are in a strong position," she explained. "But these things get messy. Are you absolutely certain this is the path you want to take?" "I am," I said, surprising myself with how firm my voice sounded. That afternoon, I drove back to Buffalo, 9 hours in better weather, but with a heavier heart. Frank was surprised to see me back early, but did not ask questions when he saw my expression. I arranged for an extended stay hotel near the construction site, and threw myself into work with a focus that even Frank noticed. "Whatever is driving you, I appreciate the dedication," he said, after I had worked 14 hours straight, solving a critical design issue. Sarah's messages evolved from frantic apologies to anger. "You cannot just ghost your wife to bargaining. Please just give me one chance to explain to depression. I do not know how to live with what I have done." I maintained minimal contact, responding only to practical questions about bills or household matters. Each brief exchange was like ripping off a bandage, painful but necessary. 3 weeks passed in this limbo. I established a new routine in Buffalo work gym, occasional dinners with coworkers, therapy sessions twice a week. The counselor helped me process the grief and betrayal. I felt assuring me that my reactions were normal. "You are mourning not just the relationship but the future you had planned, and the person you thought your wife was," she explained during one particularly difficult session. One of my coworkers, David, had gone through a similar situation the year before. "The worst part is not knowing who they really are," he told me during a late dinner after work. "You think you know someone completely, then discover they have been wearing a mask." On the Friday marking 3 weeks since that fateful night, I received a call from our home number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Drew Sarah's voice sounded smaller somehow. I drove to Buffalo. "I am in town. Please, just 30 minutes of your time. That is all I ask." "Why would I do that?" I asked, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. "Because 10 years deserves at least a conversation," she replied. I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop near my hotel, a neutral location where I could easily leave if needed. When I arrived, I almost did not recognize her. She had lost weight, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. Her normally perfectly styled hair hung limply around her face. "Thank you for coming," she said, hands wrapped tightly around her coffee mug as if seeking warmth. I sat across from her, maintaining emotional distance despite the physical proximity. "Say what you came to say." Tears immediately filled her eyes. "I am so sorry, Drew. What you heard, it was horrible, inexcusable. I was drunk and bitter, and playing up to Amanda's negativity. I never ever wished you harm. But you meant the rest I stated rather than asked. The part about me being an ambitious bore." She looked down. "I was unhappy, yes, but I handled it all wrong. Instead of talking to you, I let resentment build. Amanda encouraged me to focus on the negative. And the hotel receipt, the late nights, the jewelry not given to you by me," color flooded her cheeks. "There was someone. It ended before that night. It meant nothing. It meant everything." I corrected her. "It meant our vows were just words to you." "What can I do?" she pleaded. "How can I fix this?" I looked at her directly. "You cannot. Some things once broken stay broken. I love you," she whispered. "No, I replied gently. You love who you needed me to be. I was never that person, and you were never honest enough to tell me who you really needed. As I stood to leave, the coffee shop door opened, and Amanda walked in. Her eyes widened when she saw me. I told you to wait in the car, Sarah hissed at her. I thought you might need backup. Amanda replied defensively, then turned to me. Drew, I am sorry too. What you heard was the truth spoken in wine. I finished for her. Shakespeare had it right. I was jealous, Amanda admitted suddenly, of what you and Sarah had. After my divorce, I wanted everyone to be as miserable as I was. I encouraged her worst thoughts, her worst behaviors. I looked between the two sisters, suddenly feeling nothing but tired. You both need to take responsibility for your own choices. I have a life to rebuild. I walked out, leaving them both staring after me. For the first time since that night, I felt the weight on my chest begin to lift. The Buffalo project finished ahead of schedule and under budget, largely due to my obsessive focus. Frank called me into his office my final week. I am offering you the regional manager position, he said without preamble. It is a permanent relocation to Buffalo, significant pay, increase more responsibility. I will take it. I replied immediately. Do not. You want to discuss it with your wife first? He asked, looking confused. There is no wife to discuss it with anymore, I said simply. Understanding dawned in his eyes. I am sorry to hear that. But professionally, this is good news for both of us. The divorce proceedings moved forward. Sarah did not contest anything, agreeing to all terms, with a resignation that her lawyer clearly found frustrating. We sold the house, divided the proceeds and other assets, and officially ended our marriage with signatures on sterile legal documents. I found a small but modern apartment in Buffalo, and slowly began building a new life. I joined a rock climbing gym, something I had always wanted to try, but Sarah had dismissed as dangerous. I reconnected with college friends in the area. I read books that had gathered dust on my nightstand during years of marriage. 6 months after that snowy night, I ran into Sarah at the grocery store during a brief visit back to Boston to see James. She looked startled, then hopeful, when she saw me. You look good, she offered cautiously. Thanks. How are you? I asked, meaning it sincerely. Getting by, she replied. Started therapy. Moved to a smaller place, trying to figure out who I am without the versions of me I was trying to be. We chatted awkwardly for a few minutes before parting ways. Later, James told me she had been through a rough period, depression, briefly losing her job, a falling out with Amanda. Do you feel bad for her? He asked, as we watched a baseball game at his place. I considered the question carefully. I feel bad for the pain she is going through, yes, but I do not feel responsible for it. That is growth, man, James said, raising his beer bottle in a toast. My parents visited my new place in Buffalo that summer. Over dinner one night, my mother broached the subject of forgiveness. It does not mean reconciliation, she clarified. Forgiveness is for you, not for her. I am getting there, I told her honestly. Some days are harder than others. A week later, I received a letter from Sarah, not an email or text, but an actual handwritten letter. Unlike her previous communications, this one asked for nothing. I am writing not to change your mind or earn forgiveness, she wrote, but to acknowledge the pain I caused someone who deserved so much better. You were always the person you presented yourself, to be dedicated, honest, loving. I was the one wearing masks. I hope your new life brings you the happiness you deserve. I found myself crying as I read it, not from renewed pain, but from something like closure. I never responded, but I kept the letter. Gradually, I rediscovered joy. I learned to cook properly beyond the basics I had known before. I took a photography class and found I had a good eye for composition. I made new friends, and even went on a few casual dates, though I was transparent about not being ready for anything serious. I visited places Sarah and I had planned to see together, but now experienced them on my own terms. I climbed mountains in the Adirondacks, toured wineries in the Finger Lakes, spent weekends exploring Toronto just across the Canadian border. With each new experience, the grip of betrayal loosened. I began to see that winter night not as an ending but as a painful but necessary redirection. 1 year after that fateful birthday, I found myself in a much different place, literally and figuratively. My apartment overlooked the Buffalo waterfront. My new position challenged and fulfilled me. I had real friendships, not just the superficial social connections that had characterized much of my married life. I still thought about Sarah occasionally, but without the searing pain that had once accompanied those thoughts. Through therapy and self-reflection, I had come to understand that our marriage had been flawed long before that night, built on incomplete versions of ourselves maintained through avoidance rather than honest communication. Sarah had emailed a few months earlier to let me know she had moved to Chicago for a fresh start. She had retrained as a real estate agent, leaving interior design behind. Amanda had apparently done some growing of her own, reconciling with her ex-husband and working on her issues with a therapist. James visited, often marveling at the transformation in me. "You know what is weird?" he commented during one visit. "You seem happier now than you ever did with Sarah." I realized he was right. The relationship had constrained us both in ways neither of us had been honest about. The most valuable lesson I learned through this journey was the importance of self-respect. That night, standing in our kitchen with the cake I had risked my life to deliver, I had faced a crucial choice: accept unacceptable treatment or walk away. Choosing to leave was the hardest and best decision I had ever made. I also learned that love without mutual respect and honesty is just an illusion. Comfortable perhaps, but ultimately unsustainable. Real love must be grounded in truth, even when that truth is difficult. The crisis had revealed who truly stood by me. James, my parents, even colleagues like Frank, who respected my dedication despite personal turmoil. These connections, based on authentic understanding rather than convenience or history, proved more valuable than I could have imagined. Perhaps most importantly, I learned that trust once rebuilt with proper boundaries is still possible. The betrayal had not destroyed my capacity to believe in others. It had merely taught me to be more discerning about who earned that belief. Looking back, I feel grateful for that treacherous drive through the snowstorm. Without it, I might have continued for years in a marriage that was slowly poisoning both of us. Sometimes the most painful moments in our lives are actually doorways to something better. I do not know what the future holds. I am open to finding love again, but I will bring a wiser, more authentic self to any new relationship. I now understand that driving through storms, whether literal blizzards or the metaphorical storms of life, requires both courage and the wisdom to know which journeys are worth the risk. Have you ever had a moment when a painful truth changed the entire direction of your life? Share your story in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Your support means the world to me as I continue sharing these life experiences. And if you know someone who might need to hear this message about self-respect and new beginnings, share this video with them. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes what feels like the end is really just the beginning of something better.